call Donald Trump a cheat in your opening testimony. What would you call yourself?
A fool.
You calling... Okay, well, no comment on that.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, we said we were in search of the truth. I don't believe that Michael Cohen is capable of telling the truth. And I would hope that as this committee moves forward, that when we have the opportunity to subpoena witnesses, we subpoena witnesses that are not recently disbarred, are not convicted felon, and witnesses that haven't committed bank fraud and tax fraud. That is how we're going to determine the truth. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield the balance of my time to the ranking member.
I think the gentleman for you. I would just make one point. We just had a 5-minute debate where Mr. Cohen disputes what the Southern District of New York found, what the judge found, that he was actually guilty of committing bank fraud. If this statement back here doesn't say it all, Cohen's consciousness of wrongdoing is fleeting, his remorse is minimal, his instinct is to blame others is strong. There's only one wrong with that statement. His remorse is non-existent. He just debated a member of Congress saying, I really didn't do anything wrong with the false bank things that I'm guilty of and going to prison for.
Mr. Jordan, that's not what I said, and you know that that's not what I said. I said I pled guilty, and I take responsibility for my actions. Shame on you, Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Chairman,
not what I said.
Mr. Chairman,
that's not what I said. What I said is I took responsibility, and I take responsibility. What I was doing is explaining to the gentleman that his facts are inaccurate. I take responsibility for my mistakes. All right, I am remorseful, and I am going to prison. I will be away from my wife and family for years. So before you turn around and you cast more dispersion, please understand, there are people watching you today that know me a whole lot, but I made mistakes. I own them, and I didn't fight with the Southern District of New York. I didn't put the system through an entire scenario. But what I did do is I pled guilty, and I am going to be, again, going to prison.
Mr. Norton.
Mr. Cohen.
I'd like to yield some time to Congressman Jordan.
I yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Cohen, I'm going to come back to the question I asked before with regards to your false statement that you submitted to Congress. On here, it was very clear that it asked for contracts with foreign entities over the last 2 years. Have you had any foreign contract with foreign entities, whether it's Navaris or the Korean airline or Kazakhstan BTA Bank? Your testimony earlier said that you had contracts with them. In fact, you went into detail.
I believe it talks about lobbying. I did no lobbying. On top of that, they are not government.
I'm not asking about lobbying, Mr. Cohen.
They are not government agencies.
Do you have foreign
publicly traded companies?
Do you have foreign contracts?
I currently have no foreign contracts.
Did you have foreign contracts over the last 2 years?
Foreign contracts.
Contracts with foreign entities. Did you have contracts? Yes.
Yes.
Why didn't you put them on the form? It says it's a criminal offense to not put them on this form for the last 2 years. Why did you not do that?
Because those foreign companies that you're referring to are not government companies.
It says non-governmental, Mr. Cohen. You signed it.
They're talking about me as being non-governmental.
And right, it says foreign agency. It says foreign contracts. Do you want us to read it to you?
I read it, and it was reviewed by my counsel, and I am a non-government employee. It was not lobbying, and they are not foreign.
This has nothing to do with lobbying. It says it's a criminal offense to not list all your foreign contracts. That's what it says.
Well, then I'm going to take a look at it before I leave.
No, you've heard it.
I will, and hopefully I will amend it prior to leaving, because that's not the way I read your document.
You know, it's just one more example, Mr. Cohen, of you skirting the truth. Okay, I want to ask one other question. One other question, Mr. Cohen. It's my time, not yours. Were you advised, or was your counsel advised, to withhold your written testimony to the latest possible date, as John Dean said last night on CNN?
Was it my what?
Were you advised, or was your counsel advised, to withhold your written testimony to this committee at the latest possible date, to get it to this committee at the latest possible date, as John Dean said that he advised you? Yes or no?
No. We were
He never
working.
advised you.
John Dean? I've never spoken with John Dean.
Has he spoken to your attorney?
I don't know. I've never spoken
Well,
to
ask
John
your
Dean.
attorney. He's right
we
there
were
behind
working
you.
last night till 11, 12 o'clock at
You've
night.
known
in
that
order
you've
to
been
finish.
coming for some time.
You may answer the question. Answer the question. If you
We were working till 11, 12 o'clock last night to finish everything.
So you were writing it last night, Mr. Cohen?
we were
Don't
making
give me
edits.
that bull.
We were making edits all the way through the night.
recognize Mr. Ruda.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen,
2016, did you travel to Europe?
Yes.
Did you meet with persons associated with the Moscow Tower project?
No.
It was for personal? Or,
Personal. My daughter was studying at Queen Mary in London.
so you did not meet with any Russians?
Questions have been raised about whether I know of direct evidence that Mr. Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia. I do not. And I want to be clear. But I have my suspicion.
Mr. Cohen, can you just clarify, did you say that at times you would do what you thought Mr. Trump wanted you to do, not specifically what he told you to do?
At times, yes.
So you just went on your intuition?
I don't know if I would call it intuition as much as I would just say my knowledge of what he wanted, because it happened before, and I knew what he had wanted.
Does a lawyer have a duty to provide his client with good legal advice?
Yes,
Were you a good lawyer to Mr. Trump?
I believe so.
When you arranged a payment to Ms. Clifford, you say in your testimony, I'm going to quote from your testimony, that you did so, quote, without bothering to consider whether that was improper, much less whether it was the right thing to do. You said that, unquote. That's your testimony today. You said you didn't even consider whether it was legal. How could you give your client legal advice when you're not even considering whether it's legal?
I did what I knew Mr. Trump wanted. This conversation with Mr. Trump started.
I didn't ask whether you're a good fixer. I asked whether you were a good lawyer.
Sometimes you have to melt both together. I needed to, at that time, ensure and protect Mr. Trump. And
So-
if I put my, which I'm clearly suffering the penalty of, I clearly erred on the side of wrong.
So you feel like without bothering to consider whether it was proper, much less whether it was the right thing to do, by ignoring any conscience, if you have one, that you were protecting Mr. Trump.
I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand
You
your
feel that
question.
was how to protect. As his lawyer, you feel that you did a good job. You said you were a good lawyer, right?
That's
Is that
correct.
being a good lawyer? To not even consider whether it's legal or not?
I didn't work for the campaign. I was working and I was trying to protect
say
Mr.
anything about
Trump.
a campaign.
I
said
sat
Mr.
with
Trump.
Mr. Trump, and this goes back all the way to 2011. This wasn't the first scenario with Ms. Daniels.
Let's go back then.
So my point is, this was an ongoing situation. It didn't just start in
Right.
October. Sir,
I wanna
please,
go
you have
back.
to let me finish.
Well,
It started in it didn't start in
Let me
October. It
ask you
started
specifically
many
on that.
years earlier.
when were you disbarred?
Yesterday, from what I read in the paper.
Yesterday. When should you have been disbarred, based on the legal counsel you were giving your client?
I don't have an answer for your question.
How
sir.
long were you counsel for Mr. Trump?
Since 2007.
When is the first time you gave him bad legal advice or failed to inform him of his legal obligations, as you testified today you did in the case of the payment to Ms. Clifford? When was the first time you did that? Would that qualify for disbarment?
I don't know, sir. I'm not the Bar Association.
I think you should consult with them maybe occasionally on some of these things.
Well, there's no point now. I lost my law license.
Has anybody else promised to pay Mr. Davis for representing you?
No.
Nobody has.
No. Are you offering?
Question, quickly. July, you said, and this is also in your testimony, in the days before the Democratic Convention, you became privy to a conversation that some of Hillary Clinton's emails would be leaked. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Was that in, you said late July? Do you know the exact day?
I believe it was either the 18th or the 19th, and I would guess that it would be on the 19th.
But it was definitely July.
I believe so, yes.
Do you know that was public knowledge in June? This was Mr. Assange, and I'd like to submit this, unanimous consent to submit this for the record.
Without objection, so.
Mr. Assange reported to the media on June 12th that those emails would be leaked. So I'm not saying you have fake news. I'm saying you have old news, and there's really not much to that. I would like to yield the remainder of my time.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen, you claim that you've lied, but you're not a liar. Just to set the record straight, if you lied, you are a liar by definition. You also said a moment ago that the facts are inaccurate. If they are facts, they are accurate, and that would make you inaccurate. But I'd like to take a moment to, I'd like to know who you consulted with to prepare for today's hearing, Lanny Davis and who else?
I consulted with my counsel, Lanny Davis, as well as Michael Monaco.
All right. Did you or Michael or Lanny Davis or anyone else cooperate with the Democratic majority to prepare for this hearing?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Did you or anyone else on your team cooperate with the Democrat Party in preparing for this hearing?
We've spoken to the party.
Okay. Did you prepare with Chairman Cummings or anyone on your team?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by prepare?
Prepare for this hearing.
Prepare? I prepared with my counsel.
Did you prepare with the Democrat majority or Chairman Cummings?
We spoke with Chairman Cummings and the party.
With Chairman Schiff?
Spoke with Chairman Schiff and his people as well.
Were there any other individuals acting as a liaison for you with the majority party?
I'm sorry, sir. What are you saying?
Did you have a liaison other than these that you've mentioned who were working with the majority to prepare for this hearing?
Liaison. We spoke with the various individuals that you just raised, yes.
Tom Steyer, regarding him or any of his representatives, anyone associated with him, is he or any of them paying Lanny Davis to represent you?
Not that I'm aware of.
Who is paying Lanny Davis?
At the present moment, no one.
So he's doing all this work for nothing?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I hope so.
I kind of doubt it. But how did Lanny Davis come to represent you? Did he approach you or did you approach him?
I reached out to Lanny Davis at the recommendation of my former counsel over at McDermott, Will, and Emery, who knew Mr. Davis and Mr.
So
Davis.
you reached out to Mr. Davis?
I did, yes, initially.
Okay. So did you want to testify before Congress, or did he urge you to testify here?
I was asked to come here, and I am here, sir, voluntarily, because it's my decision.
You were asked by who? My question, did he ask you to come here?
No, sir.
Okay, because he says that he did ask you to come here and that he convinced you, and also that he did the same with Chairman Cummings as well. So your testimony here is that you approached Lanny Davis to represent you and to come here. He did not persuade you to come here.
He did not persuade me. Actually, Chairman Cummings, which is part of the conversations that we engaged in with his people, as well as Chairman Schiff and others, we spoke in order to ask me to come here voluntarily.
I find the connecting of the dots here with Mr. Davis and you, and frankly the chairman and perhaps others, to be rather stunning that there is an agenda for all this happening here today. And I believe, frankly, that that's to bring the president down, to impugn the president. You made an oath last time you were here, and that oath meant nothing to you then. We had an oath here in this very room about a month ago, and it was, quote, "Be clear that I will seek the truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God," end quote. That sounds like an oath to me. The chairman made that statement in this very room last month, but here we are today, our first big hearing, with, as you and we all know, a convicted liar, lying to Congress, a criminal. And I believe this witness is totally incompatible with the stated goal of having to seek the truth in this hearing. This is the first time in the history of Congress we have someone testifying here who has already been convicted of lying to Congress. So congratulations for being the first in Congress to do that, and Mr. Cummings as well. I can't believe we have brought this committee to its knees in terms of losing its credibility, and it's a shameful mockery of what our purpose is. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just pick up on those last comments. I want to talk about a low point. How about Mr. Papadopoulos?
It's a once-in-a-lifetime money-making opportunity, the greatest infomercial of all time, I think you said, and this may be the most trenchant observation of your whole testimony. Do you think the Trump campaign or presidency ever stopped being about making money for the president, his family, and his organization?
Yes.
When did it stop being that?
When he won the election.
And what did it become about at that point?
Then it had to be about figuring out what to do here in Washington.
You called Donald Trump a cheat in your opening testimony. What would you call yourself?
A fool.
You calling... Okay, well, no comment on that.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, we said we were in search of the truth. I don't believe that Michael Cohen is capable of telling the truth. And I would hope that as this committee moves forward, that when we have the opportunity to subpoena witnesses, we subpoena witnesses that are not recently disbarred, are not convicted felon, and witnesses that haven't committed bank fraud and tax fraud. That is how we're going to determine the truth. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield the balance of my time to the ranking member.
I think, John, for you, I would just make one point. We just had a 5-minute debate where Mr. Cohen disputes what the Southern District of New York found, what the judge found, that he was actually guilty of committing bank fraud. If this statement back here doesn't say it all, Cohen's consciousness of wrongdoing is fleeting, his remorse is minimal, his instinct is to blame others is strong. There's only one wrong with that statement. His remorse is non-existent. He just debated a member of Congress saying, I really didn't do anything wrong with the false bank things that I'm guilty of and going to prison for.
Mr. Jordan, that's not what I said, and you know that that's not what I said. I said I pled guilty, and I take responsibility for my actions. Shame on you, Mr. Jordan.
Mr.
Chairman, not what I said.
Mr. Chairman,
that's not what I said. What I said is I took responsibility, and I take responsibility. What I was doing is explaining to the gentleman that his facts are inaccurate. I take responsibility for my mistakes. All right, I am remorseful, and I am going to prison. I will be away from my wife and family for years. So before you turn around and you cast more dispersion, please understand, there are people watching you today that know me a whole lot, but I made mistakes. I own them, and I didn't fight with the Southern District of New York. I didn't put the system through an entire scenario. But what I did do is I pled guilty, and I am going to be, again, going to prison.
Mr. Norton.
Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Cohen,
may I finish my...
Mr. Cohen, he's yielded to me, and so...
I didn't finish, sir, my response.
Listen, everything's been made...
Mr. Chairman, may I finish my response, please?
I'll let you respond, but let's answer his question, please.
Mr. Cohen, everything's been made of your lies in the past. I'm concerned about your lies today. Mm-hmm. Under your testimony just a few minutes ago, to me, you indicated that you had contracts with foreign entities, and yet we have a truth and testimony disclosure form which requires you to list those foreign contracts for the last 2 years, and you put NA on there. And it's a criminal offense to not have that accurately. So when were you lying? Either in the testimony to me earlier today or when you filled out the form?
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Cohen, you may answer his question and then whatever you wanted to say on that.
His question is, unfortunately, I don't have an answer for his question. But as it
Well,
relates-
no,
as it relates-
Mr. Chairman.
As
Excuse
it
me.
relates,
The gentleman is out of order. He said he does not have an answer.
Mr. Chairman, when we were in the majority, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, hold on.
Regular order. The gentleman has just said he doesn't have an answer, and you had already gone over your time.
He's under oath to tell the truth. One of them
Again-
is not accurate,
again,
Mr. Chairman.
You will have time to answer
Mr.
questions.
Chairman, just a question. Mr. Chairman, just a question.
Mr. Raskin.
You have admitted to lying on your taxes. According to federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, you also lied to banks to get loans. The prosecutors wrote, quote, to secure loans, Cohen falsely understated the amount of debt he was carrying and omitted information from his personal financial statements to induce a bank to lend based on incomplete information, end quote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You lied on financial documents. So you lied to financial institutions in order to secure loans. So we've established that you lie on your taxes, you lie to banks, and you have been convicted of lying to Congress. It seems to me that there's not much that you won't lie about when you stand to gain from it. In fact, the prosecutors for the Southern District of New York noted that each of your crimes, quote, bear a common sense of characteristics which each involving deception and being motivated by your personal greed and ambition. Is your appearance here today motivated by your desire to remain in the spotlight for your personal benefit?
no, ma'am.
You have sought out ways to rehabilitate your image, from tax evader, bank swindler, and all-around liar to an honorable, truthful man by appearing before cable news. I'm concerned you could be using your story and this congressional platform for your personal benefit, such as a desire to make money from book deals. So can you commit under oath that you have not and will not pursue a book or movie deal based on your experiences working for the president?
No.
You cannot commit to making money off of a book or movie deal based on your work.
No. There's two parts to your question. The first part of your question, you asked me whether or not I had spoken to people regarding a possible book deal. And I have. And I've spoken to people who have sought me out regarding a movie deal.
No, I didn't ask you if you'd
That was
spoken
the
to
first part of your
anybody. I
question.
said, can you commit under oath that you will not, that you have not and will not pursue a book deal?
And I would not do that, no.
Okay. Can you commit under oath that you will not pursue opportunities to provide commentary for a major news network based on your experiences working for the president?
No.
Can you commit under oath that you will not pursue political office in the state of New York?
No.
So you don't commit to changing your ways, basically, because you want to continue to use your background as a liar, a cheater, a convicted liar to make money. That's what you want to do.
And that's going to get me a book deal and a movie deal and television and a spot on television? I don't think so.
Well, it appears that it will. I yield my time, remainder of my time, Mr. Chairman, to Mr.
Goes that he struck Melania while in that elevator because there's a camera inside, which I'm not so sure. Actually, I'm certain it's not true. I've heard about that tape for years. I've known 4 or 5 different people, including folks from AMI, who have
But there was
claimed,
some tape that went up for auction, correct?
I don't believe that auction was real, and I don't believe Mr. Trump ever struck Mrs. Trump, ever. I don't believe it.
And are you aware of anyone purchasing that tape then?
I don't believe it was ever
So you never
purchased.
saw this tape?
No, ma'am, and I know several people who went to go try to purchase it for catch-and-kill purpose. It doesn't exist.
All right.
Mr. Trump would never, in my opinion, that's not
Good to
something
know.
that he
Good
is
to
not.
know. Is there a love child?
There is not, to the best of my knowledge.
So you would pay off someone to not
It wasn't me, ma'am.
report-
It was AMI. It was David Pecker.
So he paid off someone about a love child that doesn't exist.
Correct. It was about $15,000.
I will make sure that you and I meet one day while we're in the courthouse, and I will take you for every penny you still don't have, and I will come after your Daily Beast and everybody else that you possibly know. So I'm warning you, tread very effing lightly, because what I'm going to do to you is going to be effing disgusting. You understand me? Mr. Cohen, who said that?
I did.
And did you say that, Mr. Cohen, in your testimony on page 2? You said you did things for Mr. Trump in an effort to protect him. Was that statement that I just read that you admitted to saying, did you do that to protect Donald Trump?
I did it to protect Mr. Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump.
And in your sentencing statement back in December in front of the judge, you said this, Mr. Cohen, my weakness can be characterized as a blind loyalty to Donald Trump, a blind loyalty that led me to choose a path of darkness. Is that accurate, Mr. Cohen?
I wrote that.
You wrote that and said that in front of the judge. Is that right?
That's correct.
Let me read a few other things here, and let me ask you why you did some of these things. When you filed a false tax return in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016, was all that out of blind loyalty to the president?
No, it was not.
When you failed to report $4 million in income to the Internal Revenue Service, did you do that to protect Donald Trump?
No, I did not.
And when you failed to pay $1.4 million in taxes, I got constituents who don't make that in a lifetime. When you failed to pay $1.4 million in taxes to the U.S. Treasury, was that out of some blind loyalty to the President of the United States?
It was not, but the number was 1.38 and change, and I have paid that money back to the IRS at this time.
I think the American people will appreciate that 1.3.
And I would also just like to say it was over a course of 5 years, approximately $260,000 a year.
Yeah, and that's what I said, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2000, that's 5 years.
Yes.
Got it. When you made false statements to financial institutions concerning a home equity line of credit, taxi medallions, and your Park Avenue apartment in 2013, 2014, and 2015, and you pled guilty to making those false statements to those banks, was that all done to protect the president?
No, it was not.
How about this one? When you created the fake Twitter account, Women for Cohen, and paid a firm to post tweets like this one, in a world of lies, deception, and fraud, we appreciate this honest guy at Michael Cohen, hashtag TGIF, hashtag handsome, hashtag sexy. Was that done to protect the president?
Mr. Jordan, I didn't actually set that up. It was done by a young lady that worked for Red Finch. And during the course of the campaign, which you would know gets somewhat crazy and wild, we were having fun. That's what it was, sir. We were having fun.
Was it done to protect the president?
That was not done to protect the president.
Was it a fake Twitter account?
That was, no, that was a real Twitter account. It exists.
You pay a firm to create this Twitter
I didn't
account,
pay the firm
Women
to
for
do
Cohen.
that. It was done by a young lady that works for the firm. And again, sir, we were having fun during a stressful time.
The point is, Mr. Cohen, did you lie to protect the president or did you lie to help yourself?
I'm not sure how that helped me, sir.
I'm not sure how it did either.
Right. And I would like to also note that more than half the people
And
on
here's
that
the
site
point.
are men.
Here's the point. The chairman just gave you a 30-minute opening statement, and you have a history of lying over and over and over again. And frankly, you don't have to take my word for it. Take what the court said. Take what the Southern District of New York said. Cohen did crimes that were marked by a pattern of deception and that permeated his professional life. These crimes were distinct in their harms, but bear a common set of circumstances. They each involved deception and were each motivated by personal greed and ambition. A pattern of deception for personal greed and ambition, and you just got 30 minutes of an opening statement where you trashed the President of the United States of America. Mr. Cohen, how long did you work for Donald Trump?
Approximately a decade.
10 years?
That's correct.
You said all these bad things about the president there in that last 30 minutes, and yet you worked for him for 10 years? All those bad things, I mean, if it's that bad, I can see you working for him for 10 days, maybe 10 weeks, maybe even 10 months. But you worked for him for 10 years. Mr. Cohen, how long did you work in the White House?
I never worked in the White House.
And that's the point, isn't it, Mr. Cohen?
No, sir.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not, sir.
You wanted to work in the White House.
No, sir.
You didn't get brought to the dance.
Sir.
And now?
I was extremely proud to be personal attorney to the President of the United States of America. I did not want to go to the White House. I was offered jobs. I can tell you a story of Mr. Trump reaming out Reince Priebus because I had not taken a job where Mr. Trump wanted me to, which is working with Don McGahn at the White House General Counsel's office.
Mr. Cohen, you work for the President.
Sir, one second. All right. What I said at the time, and I brought a lawyer in who produced a memo as to why I should not go in, because there would be no attorney-client privilege. And in order to handle some of the matters that I talked about in my opening, that it would be best suited for me not to go in, and that every president had a personal
Cohen, here's
attorney.
what I see. Here's what I see. I see a guy who worked for 10 years and is here trashing the guy he worked for 10 years, didn't get a job in the White House, and now you're behaving just like everyone else who's got fired or didn't get the job they wanted, like Andy McCabe, like James Comey, same kind of selfish motivation after you don't get the thing you want. That's what I see here today, and I think that's what the American people.
Mr. Sir.
You stated that Trump never directed you to lie to Congress. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Therefore, you lied to Congress on your own accord and then admitted to lying to Congress, correct?
I've already stated my piece on that. I knew what he wanted me to do. I was staying on party line.
But he never directed you to lie to Congress?
He did not use those words, no.
In your evidence that you provided this committee a mere 2 hours before the hearing started, were payments made to you by Mr. Trump, correct?
Amongst other things, yes.
Yet other than your testimony here today, there is absolutely no proof that those specific payments were for those specific purposes. Is that correct?
It's my testimony that the check that I produced as part of this testimony, the $35,000, and then the second check that's signed by Alan Weisselberg and Don Trump Jr., were two checks out of the 11 that were meant for the reimbursement of the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels.
So in your testimony on page 13, you claim, and I quote, Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from a home equity line of credit to avoid any money being tracked back to him that could negatively impact his campaign. Do you have any proof of this direction?
Just the payment, sir.
So no email?
Mr. Trump doesn't have email.
So no recording?
I do not have recordings, no.
No text message?
Mr. Trump doesn't text message.
So no direction other than your testimony today that that's what the payment was for?
And the fact that I paid on his behalf, at his direction, the money to Keith Davidson's IOLA account. You're right, there's no other documentation I have.
So nothing that you produced as part of your exhibits proved that President Trump directed you in any way to make that payment?
I don't even know how to answer that, sir.
Well, it's pretty simple. There's nothing in the evidence that shows, or the exhibits that you provided today, that show that Trump directed you to make those payments.
Other than the non-disclosure agreement that has been seized by government authorities and is widely shown, I don't believe there's anybody out there that believes that I just decided to pay $130,000 on his behalf.
Well, you were his attorney for over 10 years.
That doesn't mean that I pay $130,000.
Well, it doesn't also mean that he wasn't paying you for representation of counsel.
Okay.
So how did President Trump even know you had a HELOC?
I'm so sorry, sir?
How did President Trump even know you had a HELOC?
Because we discussed it. Because I told him the same thing, that I didn't want my wife to find out about it. And as one additional, Rudy Giuliani himself came out and expressed that Mr. Trump reimbursed me for the money that was spent to pay Stormy Daniels.
And did you tell Chris Cuomo that you had no access to Mr. Trump during October and November of 2016?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
Your interview with Chris Cuomo.
I would need to see the document.
Did you also tell Chris Cuomo that you made these payments without telling Mr. Trump because you wanted to protect Mr. Trump?
And I was protecting Mr. Trump.
And you told him that you made these payments without telling him.
When I said that, if that's what I said to Chris Cuomo, yes, that was my line.
And if this unsupported claim was true, then it would be part of an ongoing investigation as evidence of a crime, and the Department of Justice would not let you discuss it during your testimony here today. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Respond to Mr. Lynch. I want you to think about this. When have you ever seen a federal agency where this has happened? James Comey, director, fired. Andy McCabe, deputy director, fired. Lied 3 times under oath, under investigation, right, as we speak. Jim Baker, FBI counsel, demoted, then left, currently under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Connecticut. Lisa Page, demoted, then left. Peter Strzok, deputy head of counterintelligence, demoted, then fired. That's what happened. That's what we're concerned about. And today we actually asked for Rod Rosenstein. Oh, by the way, we now know 3 people have told us Rod Rosenstein actually was contemplating using the 25th Amendment to remove the guy from presidency who the American people put there. And we asked for him to be a witness today, and the chairman said no. And instead we get 30 minutes from a guy who's going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. Mr. Cohen, I got 2 quick questions before I yield back to my colleague. Mr. Heiss asked you who all you've talked to. You said you spoke to Mr. Schiff. Obviously, you spoke to Mr. Cummings. You're going in front of both committees. You're here today. You're going to be in front of Mr. Schiff's committee tomorrow. Have you spoken to Chairman Nadler or anyone on his staff, or have any of your attorneys spoken to Chairman Nadler?
I don't know about my attorneys. I have not spoken to.
You don't know if your attorneys have
I have not spoken to Congressman Nadler, and I'm not aware, sir. I'm not aware if my attorneys. I can ask them.
Can turn around and ask him.
The answer, sir, is no.
Okay. And you said at this present time, Mr. Davis is not getting paid. Does that are you anticipating him receiving some kind of compensation in the future?
When I start to earn a living.
He's going to wait 3 years? Yeah. Wow.
The answer is yes.
That's a first. I've never known a lawyer wait 3 years to get paid.
I guess he thinks it's important.
All right. With that, I yield to the gentleman from Arizona.
Well, thank you. Mr. Cohen, you know, you're a disgraced lawyer. I mean, you've been disbarred. And so I'm sure you remember, well, maybe you don't remember, duty of loyalty, duty of confidentiality, attorney-client privilege. I think the gentleman over your right side actually understands that very, very well and wouldn't do what you are doing here today. So let's go back at this credibility. You want us to make sure that we think of you as a real philanthropic icon, that you're about justice, that you're the person that somebody would call at 3 o'clock in the morning. No, they wouldn't. Not at all. You saw Mr. Comer dissect you. Right in front of this committee, you conflicted your testimony, sir. You're a pathological liar. You don't know truth from falsehood.
Sir, I'm sorry. Are you referring to me or the president?
Hey, this is my time.
Are you referring to me, sir, or the president?
When I ask you a question,
yes.
I'll ask for an answer.
Sure.
Now, are you familiar with Rule 35 of the Federal Rules and Criminal Procedures?
I am now.
Oh. So the committee understands that you've been in contact with the Southern District of New York. Is that true?
I am in constant contact with the Southern District of New York regarding ongoing investigations.
And part of that application is to reduce sentencing time, is it not? Yes.
There is a possibility.
Yes. The answer is yes.
No, it's not, sir.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's
not.
And so testimony here could actually help you out in getting your sentence lessened. Isn't that true?
I'm not really sure how my appearance here today is providing substantial information that the Southern District can use for the creation of a case. Now, if there is something that this group can do for me, I would gladly welcome it.
Well, I got to tell you, you know, America's watching you. I've been getting texts right and left saying, how can anybody listen to this pathological person? He's got a problem. He doesn't know fact from fiction. And that's what's sad here, is that you didn't do this for Donald Trump, to protect Donald Trump. You did it for you. This is all about you. This is all about this Twitter feed and let me read one of those. Another one. Women who love and support Michael Cohen, strong, pit bull, sex symbol, no nonsense, business oriented, and ready to make a difference.
1,000 followers.
Ready to make a difference against the law. That's pretty sad. You know, over and over again, you know, we want to have trust. It's built on the premise that we're truthful, that we come forward. But there's no truth with you whatsoever. That's why That's important to you, to look up here and look at the old adage that our moms taught us. Liar, liar, pants on fire. No one should ever listen to you and give you credibility. It's sad. It's sad that we have come. In fact, I want to quote the chairman's very words. This is a real, hold on.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Sad state.
Gentleman's time has expired.